Hello everyone, this is the storyteller and welcome to yet another video about women's studies. Women's studies. Have you ever wondered what is women's studies? Well, let's look into it. Women's studies is an academic field that draws on feminist and interdisciplinary methods. Well, see, when you hear the phrase women's studies, I automatically think that this must be the study about women and their basic biology, their basic psychology. But I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Why? Because women's studies is a feminist, political, interdisciplinary field of these interdisciplinary study devoted to gender identity and gender representation as central categories of analysis. Analysis of crazy political ideals is called gender studies or women's studies. This field includes women's studies gender studies includes women's studies concerning women, feminism, gender, and politics, men's studies, and queer studies. So, what is modern gender theory? The modern gender theory, the modern academic sense of the word in the context of social roles of men and women dates at least back to 1945 and has popularized and developed by the feminist movement from the 1970s onwards. These people took over the whole academic place since the 1970s. So they have always been criticized by more sane people around the world. So I'm giving you a few very crazy things about gender studies in this article from newmediacentral.net that says 5 most ridiculous gender studies papers published by peer-reviewed journals. 5 most craziest. Gender studies is one of the most controversial fields in contemporary academia, and for many good reasons, yet despite the fact that this field pushes out many ridiculous, pseudo-scientific, politicized ideas, it's not often challenged within academia itself. It is not challenged within academia itself because no actual scholar, actually thinking scholar, can bear the burden of talking to these insane people of gender studies. That's why the gender studies community was visibly shaken when 2 academics managed to get a gender studies related paper published in a peer-reviewed journal. The problem is that the paper was completely bogus, a hoax. The paper titled "The Conceptual Penis is a Social Construct." So somebody tried to make a hoax paper and got it admitted into a journal, and they wanted to try the worst possible thing to put in a journal and get away with it, and they titled it "The Conceptual Penis as a Social Construct." It's weird, I know. The paper was meant to see how ridiculous of a paper they could make that a paper would publish, and can be seen as a homage to Sokal affair, which was a similar hoax, but at a much larger level. This hoax was prompted a lot of anger and criticism, primarily arguing that the paper they published it in was a pay-to-publish predatory journal and thus not a serious and respected journal. Despite the fact that if you read the initial commentary on the hoax, it was also partly meant to criticize these style of predatory journals. But while this hoax may not be the next so-called, there is a more disturbing fact here. There are some Twitter channels which have continuously mocked these ideas of feminist ideology. It's called Real Peer Review. To really show you how ridiculous some of these I have collected, this person has collected 5 hilariously bad gender studies papers that make any parodies and hoaxes look reasonable in comparison. First is feminist glaciology. Feminist glaciology, number 1. Perhaps the most infamous of the bunch. The paper is called Glaciers, Gender and Science, a feminist glaciology framework for global environmental change research. It was authored by science historian Mark Carey, who has become the embodiment of terrible papers and brought ridicule of gender studies to the mainstream. The paper argues that the relation between gender and glaciers has shockingly been understudied. Glaciers and gender. How do they even relate? I don't know. I mean, water is drunk by humans, and humans have genders. Is that what this is? I can't understand. And proposed a merge between feminist post-colonial science and feminist political ecology with the study of glaciers. Study of glaciers by feminists. Wow. The paper reached the mainstream after it hit Fox News, where it was noted that the work behind this paper received $430,000, $430K in tax dollar funding. According to Kerry, the fact that his paper has been ridiculed so much was evidence for him that, under quote, glaciers are, in fact, highly politicized sites of contestation. Weird stuff. See, this completely briefly tells you that how far that these feminist idiots can go to just link everything, like link a brick to a plastic to the holder of an electrical bulb. Everything, they can link everything and make a theory of oppression. Oh, that brick is oppressing. A brick is oppressing the electricity holder, and that electricity holder is oppressing the light bulb. That's basically their theory. Number 2, pumpkins are racist, sexist, and symbol of white privilege. Pumpkins are racist, sexist. Okay, okay. We all know that this guy is saying. Okay, we all know that pumpkin spice lattes are like the whitest drink ever. At least it's pretty much a well-known stereotype that any Starbucks latte with a fancy name is associated with white hipster girls. Of course, it's just a silly stereotype, right? Well, not according to Lisa Jordan Powell, a scholar at the University of British Columbia with a focus on agricultural philosophy. Agriculture does not need philosophy of dumb shit. Agriculture does not need philosophy. Agriculture needs proper science. In her paper, The Perilous Whiteness of Pumpkins, The Perilous Whiteness of Pumpkins, she actually asks the very serious question of why pumpkin spice lattes are so beloved among white women, more so than yoga pants or scented candles. Her own words here. Her conclusion is that it must be a part of a bigger inherent issue, the issue of whiteness in relation to pumpkins. Yes, she has made the conclusion that pumpkins, she seems to be really into overanalyzing this squash plant as she tries to tie the history of pumpkins and white people. Pumpkins as a symbol of white luxury and the racist way of growing pumpkins itself. Well, I don't know about this paper, but according to a barista on Quora who was asked this question, the pumpkin spice latte is popular among a very wide crowd, and that the real favorite latte among white girls is chai tea latte. Chai tea latte. But chai is so much drunk in India and Asian countries. Okay, so third point, on all levels except physical, I am a hippopotamus. I am a hippopotamus, says another crazy woman here probably. No, sorry. I can't really say what if it's a man or a woman. Florentine Felix Morin, a visiting scholar at the University of Arizona, identifies as a hippopotamus. And he's a man, his paper, Ego Hippo. The subject as a metaphor is all about his identity. So he thinks that he is a hippopotamus. The paper talks about the possible equation of transgender people with trans species. Transgender people with trans species. There is nothing as trans species. There is nothing as trans species. Your chromosomes cannot just alter. Your DNA cannot just alter. You cannot become a hippopotamus, you idiot. Arguing for the inclusion of xenogenders, whatever that means. Most of the paper hardly even reads as a study, but rather as a blog about how he feels about being a completely different species of animal. So you can see, he tries to identify as a hippo because it's his construct. Basically, this whole gender studies or women studies in specific, these are about constructs. It is all about constructs. It's completely imaginary. He says, and these people have created a whole subject from their imagination, literally from their imagination. He says that being a hippo makes him feel cute, confident, sexy, and safe. He claims that his hippo identity allows his to go beyond the concepts of sex, gender, and age, because a hippo is apparently a sexless, ageless being. No, it is not. Hippo is definitely not sexless or agender or ageless. Now, the phenomenon of people identifying as other animals isn't new actually. There is an entire subculture on the internet dedicated on people who identify as non-humans, usually animals. But this is probably the first time one of them made an academic paper about it. So yeah, this is a fetish. This is a fetish that some people have, but it doesn't mean that you are really a hippo. Fucking idiot. The next one is even hilarious. Number 4, menstruation is a social construct. Oh boy, menstruation is not a social construct. It is a physical process. It's a physical, natural process. Katie Ann Hasson, an assistant professor of the University of Southern California, is very confused because she noticed that menstruation seems to be a natural bodily process despite feminist theorists saying otherwise. In her paper, Not a Real Period, Social and Material Constructions of Menstruation, in this study, which was published by one of the top-ranking gender study journals, she exposed this weird contradiction. Now, this article would make more sense if it talked about the mood swings caused by a menstrual cycle, but no, it does not talk about the mood swings of the person. It actually seems to challenge the natural cause of menstruation, despite the fact that the concept of menstruation has been clearly proven as a byproduct of the womb releasing its unfertilized egg as well as other tissue through blood flow. She still seems to think what really defines the menstruation is rarely questioned. Well, at least it doesn't seem to be causing climate change. Or does it? These people are very, very, very confused. They don't really know anything scientific because they don't know how to observe. To observe is the basic primary process of science, but they are so unscientific and they don't rely on actual observations. That's why they can't understand natural or scientific words like menstruation. And the fifth and the most important, like I said, the scientific method fifth number is the scientific method is patriarchal and objectifies nature. Like I said, feminists are very unscientific. They don't know how to observe. They say that scientific method is patriarchal. The scientific method is very straightforward. You observe something, you create a hypothesis, you make predictions of said hypotheses, you find evidence confirming your predictions, and you conclude whether your hypothesis can be considered valid, which means that you take like 9 or 10 experiments, and if you see that 9 experiments of the 10 experiments are ending up with the same results, while only one ends up with one variable result, you ignore that the variable result and say that 9 out of 10 results were valid, and that's real science. That's real science. The science means a majority of observations. It's a very logical and practical principle that is based on the concept of actually observing something and finding evidence of it. And this paper seems to be the reason why the field of gender studies has utterly failed at doing this. There is this paper about science being a patriarchal thing. The paper called Science, a Masculine Disorder. It ends with a question mark. That's a very weird thing. Every time you see that anybody in literature business, if ends a sentence with a question mark, it means that he or she is not sure about this particular sentence. He is completely making a speculation, and if it says science a masculine disorder question mark, so definitely it is speculation, is one of the more classic papers that goes back to the 80s. In the 80s, this was prepared. The paper basically argues that science, the thing that actually allows us to find the truth based on evidence, is actually a conspiracy to maintain male power structures. They claim that gaining knowledge is a conspiracy to help special interests, and that these interests are evil power structures that oppress women. They oppress women. Knowledge oppresses women. They claim that the scientific method is inherently masculine because, get this, it objectifies nature. It objectifies nature. Nature is completely objective, man of God. Nature, in 99.999% of nature, life doesn't exist. Inorganic science, do you know about it? Inorganic particles, there is no life. They are objects. And you are made of those objects combined into tissues and molecules and cells. That's how the human body is made. So there is nothing wrong in objectifying nature because they are object. Nature is object. Freaking nature. Apparently, science is also evil because it neglects the personal feelings of women. Yes, a way to perpetuate the stereotype that rationality and logic are inherently masculine. Well, I for one welcome my patriarchal science overlords. So in short, we don't really even need any hoaxes, because no matter how ridiculous of a hoax you make, you simply cannot imitate the true stupidity that is gender studies. All these 5 are real studies published in well-respected, highly ranked, peer-reviewed journals. And if you still think this field is legitimate, well, call me old-fashioned, but I don't think I'm ready for a world filled with trans-hippopotamus people. Well, this is it for today. Like and subscribe if you like the content, and we'll be back with more levels of cringe and reviews. But, man, somebody please stop to these crazy women. Peace.